You watch them climb the corporate ladder while you remain stuck on the same rung. You see them negotiate deals that leave others empty-handed while they walk away victorious. You witness them making decisions that would keep you awake at night with guilt, yet they sleep soundly on beds made of their calculated victories. The ruthless ones. The ones who seem to possess an invisible key to doors that remain forever locked to the rest of us. But here's what haunts you in those quiet moments of honest self-reflection. They're not necessarily smarter than you. They're not more talented, more educated, or more deserving. Yet they consistently emerge victorious from situations where you would have compromised, hesitated, or allowed empathy to cloud your judgment. They embody ruthless success in its purest form, and their winning strategies seem to operate by rules that were never taught in any ethics class. What if everything you've been taught about achieving success was fundamentally wrong? What if the very qualities you've been conditioned to admire, kindness, fairness, putting others first, are actually the invisible chains keeping you from the life you deserve? This isn't about becoming a monster or abandoning your humanity. This is about recognizing a brutal truth that most people spend their entire lives refusing to acknowledge. The world doesn't reward the good-hearted. It rewards those who understand the psychology of success and aren't afraid to implement it. Consider the last time you wanted something desperately. A promotion, a relationship, a business opportunity. Did you go after it with unwavering determination, or did you hold back because you worried about stepping on toes? Did you present your case with calculated precision, or did you hope that simply being deserving would be enough? The ruthless person in that same situation would have mapped out every variable, identified every pressure point, and executed a strategy designed not just to win, but to ensure their competition never stood a chance. You've been living in a world where assertiveness is often mistaken for aggression, where calculated risks are seen as reckless, and where the willingness to prioritize your own interests is labeled as selfishness. Meanwhile, those who've mastered the art of strategic ruthlessness understand something you don't. They know that success isn't a participation trophy handed out to the most deserving. It's a prize seized by those who recognize that life is fundamentally a competition, whether you choose to compete or not. The uncomfortable truth is that while you've been playing by rules that emphasize fairness and consideration, others have been playing an entirely different game. They've discovered that certain mindset shifts transform not just how you pursue goals, but how the world responds to your very presence. They've learned that there's a profound difference between being cruel and being strategically firm, between being heartless and being willing to make hard choices that serve your long-term interests. But why does this pattern persist across cultures, industries, and generations? Why do the calculated ones consistently outmaneuver those who lead with their hearts? The answer lies in understanding that success operates according to principles that have nothing to do with deserving and everything to do with taking. It's about recognizing that every situation contains hidden power dynamics, and those who refuse to acknowledge these dynamics become victims of them. You've probably noticed that the most successful people in your life share certain characteristics that make you slightly uncomfortable. They ask for what they want directly. They negotiate from positions of strength rather than hoping for generosity. They make decisions based on outcomes rather than feelings. They understand that leadership lessons often come disguised as moments when you must choose between being liked and being effective. The question that should be burning in your mind right now isn't whether ruthlessness leads to success. The evidence surrounding you makes that answer obvious. The real question is whether you're willing to examine why you've been so resistant to adopting these life strategies yourself, and what it might cost you to continue avoiding this fundamental truth about how the world actually works. What lies ahead will challenge everything you believed about the relationship between character and achievement, between morality and effectiveness, between being a good person and being a successful one. The journey into understanding why ruthless people triumph isn't just an exploration of their psychology. It's an examination of the forces that have kept you from accessing your own potential for personal development and strategic thinking. Prepare yourself to discover the hidden mechanisms that govern success and failure, and why the very instincts you've trusted most may have been your greatest obstacles all along. If you're ready to uncover these uncomfortable truths and transform how you think about success, hit that subscribe button now. What you're about to learn will fundamentally change how you navigate every relationship, negotiation, and opportunity that comes your way. Don't let another day pass living by rules that were designed to keep you playing small. The roots of your resistance to strategic ruthlessness run deeper than you realize. They were planted in childhood when you were taught that sharing your toys made you a good person, that waiting your turn was virtuous, and that putting others first was the highest moral achievement. These lessons created a psychological framework that Friedrich Nietzsche would have recognized immediately as the mentality of the herd, a conditioning designed to produce compliant, predictable individuals who pose no threat to existing power structures. But here's the devastating truth. While you were being molded into someone who plays fair, others were learning entirely different lessons. They discovered that power respects power, that strength attracts strength, and that the world is fundamentally shaped by those who are willing to impose their will upon it. They internalized what Carl Jung called the shadow, the dark aspects of human nature that society teaches us to suppress but never to eliminate. Your psychology of success was sabotaged before you even understood what success meant. You were taught to feel guilty about wanting more, to apologize for your ambitions, and to believe that good things come to those who wait. Meanwhile, the future masters of your industry, your social circles, and your economic class were learning that waiting is what losers do while winners act. They understood that calculated risks aren't gambling. They're strategic moves made by people who've done their homework and aren't paralyzed by the possibility of failure. The philosophical foundation of your disadvantage lies in a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of human interaction. You were raised to believe that relationships are collaborative endeavors where mutual benefit naturally emerges from mutual consideration. The ruthless understand something darker but more accurate. Every interaction contains elements of competition, negotiation, and power dynamics. Even acts of apparent kindness serve strategic purposes, whether conscious or unconscious. This isn't cynicism, it's recognition of how human psychology actually operates. When you enter a negotiation focused on finding win-win solutions, you're already operating from a position of weakness because you've announced that your primary concern is the other person's welfare. The ruthless person enters that same negotiation with a clear hierarchy of priorities. Their interests first, their long-term strategic positioning second, and the other party's satisfaction only insofar as it serves those primary objectives. Your mindset shifts have been constrained by what society calls emotional intelligence, but which often functions as emotional manipulation designed to make you more manageable. You've been trained to read rooms, accommodate others' comfort levels, and adjust your natural assertiveness to avoid making waves. This creates a psychological prison where your own instincts for self-advancement are constantly filtered through concerns about how others might react. The ruthless person has either never internalized these constraints or has consciously rejected them. They understand that your emotional comfort is not their responsibility, that your approval is not their goal, and that your opinion of their methods is irrelevant to their results. This isn't sociopathy, it's psychological clarity about where their responsibilities actually begin and end. Consider how this plays out in leadership lessons throughout history. The leaders you remember, respect, and study were rarely the nicest people in their contexts. They were the ones willing to make hard decisions that preserved their nations, built their empires, or advanced their causes. They understood that leadership often requires choosing between being loved and being effective, and they consistently chose effectiveness. Your personal development has been stunted by the belief that success should feel comfortable, that achievement should come through methods that allow you to maintain your self-image as a fundamentally good person. The ruthless understand that growth requires shedding comfortable illusions about how the world works. They've made peace with the fact that winning often feels uncomfortable to those who've been conditioned to lose gracefully. The philosophical trap you've fallen into is the assumption that moral behavior naturally leads to material success. This assumption ignores the fundamental separation between what works and what feels right according to social conditioning. The ruthless person has recognized this separation and chosen to optimize for results rather than social approval. Your life strategies have been built on the foundation of reciprocity, the belief that treating others well guarantees similar treatment in return. But reciprocity only works when both parties share the same value system and operate under the same constraints. When you encounter someone who prioritizes results over reciprocity, your entire strategic framework becomes not just ineffective but actively counterproductive. This is why you find yourself consistently surprised by betrayals, disappointed by ingratitude, and confused by outcomes that seem to reward the wrong people. You're playing chess while assuming your opponent is also playing chess, when in reality they're playing a completely different game with different rules, different objectives, and different definitions of victory. The hidden problem isn't that ruthless people exist, it's that you've been psychologically programmed to be ineffective against them while simultaneously being taught to see your ineffectiveness as moral superiority. This creates a worldview where losing becomes evidence of virtue, where being taken advantage of becomes proof of your good character, and where strategic thinking becomes something you associate with moral corruption. The ruthless person suffers from none of these psychological handicaps. They see the world as it is rather than as they wish it were. They optimize their strategies for actual human behavior rather than idealized versions of it, and they measure success by outcomes rather than intentions. Until you understand the depth of your psychological conditioning and begin to question its utility in achieving your actual goals, you'll continue to wonder why others consistently outmaneuver you in situations where you thought virtue would be enough. The price of your psychological conditioning extends far beyond missed promotions or failed negotiations. It shapes every aspect of how you move through the world, creating a cascade of consequences that compound over time until the gap between you and those who think strategically becomes unbridgeable. You're not just losing individual battles, you're losing the war for control over your own life trajectory. Watch how you respond when someone makes an unreasonable demand of your time, energy, or resources. Your first instinct isn't to evaluate whether the request serves your interests, it's to find reasons why you should comply. You've been conditioned to see refusal as selfishness, boundaries as meanness, and prioritizing your own needs as a character flaw. Meanwhile, the person making the demand operates from the opposite framework. They assume their requests are reasonable until proven otherwise, they expect you to advocate for your own interests, and they interpret your compliance as confirmation that their position was correct. This dynamic creates a feedback loop where your willingness to accommodate trains others to expect more accommodation. The ruthless person recognizes this pattern immediately and exploits it systematically. They learn that you can be pushed further than others, that you'll say yes when others would say no, and that you'll make sacrifices that others wouldn't consider. Over time, this turns you into a resource that can be harvested rather than a person who commands respect. Your career progression suffers because you've confused being valuable with being indispensable in the wrong ways. You become the person who stays late, takes on extra projects, and solves problems that aren't technically your responsibility. You think this demonstrates your worth, but it actually demonstrates your availability to be exploited. The ruthless person in your organization understands the difference between visible contribution and strategic positioning. They focus on high-impact activities that directly connect to advancement opportunities while allowing others to handle the busy work. The most devastating consequence is how this conditioning affects your relationship with your own ambition. You've learned to dress up your desires in altruistic language, to justify your goals in terms of how they'll help others, and to feel guilty about wanting things purely for yourself. This creates internal friction that the ruthless person never experiences. When they want something, they want it clearly and without apology. When they pursue a goal, they pursue it with unified psychological energy rather than fighting internal battles about whether their desires are legitimate. Your decision-making becomes contaminated by considerations that have nothing to do with optimal outcomes. You factor in how others will feel about your choices, how your decisions will be perceived, and whether your actions align with social expectations. The ruthless person makes decisions based on a much simpler calculus. What course of action is most likely to produce the result they want? This clarity of purpose creates a massive advantage in both speed and effectiveness. The compound effect of these patterns becomes most visible in your relationship with money and negotiation. You've been taught that discussing compensation is awkward, that asking for more than offered is greedy, and that good work should speak for itself. These beliefs ensure that you'll consistently earn less than your market value while watching others negotiate aggressively for resources that could have been yours. The ruthless person sees every financial interaction as a negotiation and every negotiation as an opportunity to optimize their position. Your personal relationships suffer in ways you don't recognize because you've confused being accommodating with being loving. You attract people who need your accommodating nature rather than people who value your strength. You find yourself in relationships where you give more than you receive, not because you're more loving, but because you've signaled that this dynamic is acceptable to you. The ruthless person attracts different types of relationships because they've made it clear that reciprocity is non-negotiable. Perhaps most tragically, your potential for personal growth becomes limited by your comfort zone's expansion rate rather than your actual capabilities. You wait for permission to pursue opportunities, seek consensus before making bold moves, and look for external validation before trusting your own judgment. The ruthless person operates from the assumption that they have the right to pursue what they want and the responsibility to figure out how to get it. The time you spend managing others' emotions and maintaining social harmony is time not spent developing strategic thinking, building valuable skills, or positioning yourself for advancement. While you're focused on being liked, others are focused on being effective. While you're maintaining relationships that drain your energy, they're building networks that amplify their power. While you're trying to do the right thing according to social expectations, they're doing the effective thing according to their objectives. Your stress levels remain chronically elevated because you're constantly managing conflicts between what you want and what you think you should want, between what would serve you and what would serve others, between your natural instincts and your social conditioning. The ruthless person experiences less psychological stress because they've eliminated many of these internal conflicts through clarity about their priorities. The most profound unseen consequence is how your worldview prevents you from recognizing these patterns even when they're pointed out to you. Your conditioning includes defense mechanisms that interpret strategic thinking as moral corruption, that frame assertiveness as aggression, and that recast effective behavior as somehow less authentic than ineffective behavior. You've been trained to see the symptoms of your conditioning as evidence of your moral superiority rather than as obstacles to your effectiveness. This creates a psychological prison where the very mechanisms that limit your success also provide you with justifications for why your limitations are actually virtues. Breaking free requires not just learning new strategies, but questioning the fundamental assumptions that made those strategies seem wrong in the first place. The ruthless person never fell into this trap because they either rejected these assumptions early or learned to compartmentalize them. They understand that effectiveness and morality operate in different spheres, that strategic thinking and ethical behavior aren't mutually exclusive, and that optimizing for results doesn't require abandoning all principles. It requires choosing principles that serve your long-term interests rather than your short-term social comfort. The path to strategic ruthlessness begins with a fundamental reframe that will feel uncomfortable at first. You are not responsible for managing other people's emotions, expectations, or comfort levels. This single shift eliminates approximately 70% of the psychological friction that has been slowing down your decision-making and diluting your effectiveness. The ruthless person internalized this truth early and built their entire approach to life around it. Start by conducting what you might call a responsibility audit of your current obligations. List everything you currently do that serves someone else's interests more than your own. Include the time you spend managing relationships that drain you, the projects you've accepted that don't advance your goals, and the emotional labor you perform to keep others comfortable with your presence. The ruthless person would look at this list as an inventory of resources being misallocated. Your first act of strategic repositioning involves learning to say no without providing extensive justifications. When someone makes a request that doesn't serve your interests, practice responding with simple phrases, "That doesn't work for me, I'm not available for that," or "I've decided to focus my energy elsewhere." Notice how your conditioning creates an urge to explain, to soften, to provide reasons that make your refusal seem reasonable to the other person. The ruthless person understands that over-explaining signals that you're not confident in your decision and invites negotiation where none should exist. Develop what could be called outcome-based thinking in every significant interaction. Before entering any negotiation, relationship discussion, or professional conversation, define your ideal outcome and your minimum acceptable result. Then engineer your approach to maximize the probability of achieving something within that range. This means researching the other party's interests, identifying their pressure points, and preparing strategic concessions that cost you little but appear valuable to them. The most powerful mindset shift involves reframing competition from something you avoid to something you optimize for. Your conditioning has taught you to see competitive situations as inherently negative, as zero-sum games where someone must lose for someone else to win. The ruthless person recognizes that competition is simply the mechanism through which resources get allocated in most situations. They've learned to compete skillfully rather than pretending that competition doesn't exist. Begin implementing what successful people call strategic selfishness, making decisions based on what advances your long-term interests rather than what maintains social harmony in the short term. This doesn't mean becoming cruel or abandoning all consideration for others. It means establishing a clear hierarchy where your core objectives take precedence over others' comfort, convenience, or approval. Your language patterns need to change to reflect your new strategic positioning. Eliminate phrases that signal accommodation and uncertainty. "I think maybe, if it's okay with everyone, I don't want to impose," or "sorry to bother you." Replace them with language that assumes your legitimate interests deserve consideration. "I need," "I've decided," "my preference is," or "here's what works for me." The ruthless person's language reflects confidence in their right to pursue their objectives. Practice what might be called emotional independence in high-stakes situations. Your conditioning creates an automatic response where you monitor others' emotional states and adjust your behavior to maintain their comfort. Instead, focus on the strategic dynamics of the situation. What leverage do you have? What do they need from you? What would it cost them to walk away versus what it would cost you? The ruthless person processes these variables while you're busy reading facial expressions and adjusting your tone. Develop a systematic approach to building and leveraging your network based on mutual value rather than mutual affection. Identify people whose capabilities, connections, or resources could advance your objectives. Find ways to provide value to them that establishes reciprocal obligations. The ruthless person understands that the most powerful relationships are built on interdependence rather than emotional connection. Learn to view setbacks and betrayals as information rather than personal failures. When someone takes advantage of your accommodating nature, instead of questioning your worth or their character, analyze what systemic changes you need to make to prevent similar exploitation in the future. The ruthless person treats every negative outcome as feedback about their strategic approach rather than evidence about their value as a person. Perhaps most importantly, begin measuring your success by results rather than by how your methods made you feel or how others responded to them. Your conditioning has taught you to evaluate your choices based on whether they aligned with social expectations rather than whether they produced desired outcomes. The ruthless person optimizes for effectiveness and then finds ways to feel good about effective methods. Start small with these changes because your psychological conditioning will create resistance. Choose low-stakes situations to practice strategic thinking and assertive communication. Notice how different it feels to prioritize your interests over others' comfort. Pay attention to how people respond when you stop managing their emotions and start managing your own objectives. The most liberating realization will be discovering that most people actually respect direct, strategic behavior more than accommodating, people-pleasing behavior. You've been operating under the assumption that being accommodating makes you more likable, but the truth is that it often makes you less respectable. The ruthless person understood this dynamic intuitively and built their entire social strategy around being respected rather than being liked. Your new approach to personal development should focus on building skills that increase your leverage and options rather than skills that make you more helpful to others. Learn negotiation, develop expertise that's difficult to replace, build financial independence, and cultivate relationships with people who can advance your objectives. The ruthless person invests their development energy strategically rather than broadly. The deepest revelation about ruthless success isn't about becoming heartless or abandoning your humanity. It's about recognizing that you've been living in a psychological prison built from noble-sounding lies designed to keep you controllable. The ultimate truth is that the world is shaped by those who understand power dynamics and aren't paralyzed by social conditioning that teaches them to ignore those dynamics. You've spent your entire life believing in a fundamental fairness that doesn't exist. You've operated under the assumption that good intentions create good outcomes, that playing by the rules guarantees fair treatment, and that being deserving eventually leads to receiving what you deserve. But the universe operates according to cause and effect, not according to justice. The ruthless person align themselves with how reality actually works rather than how they wish it worked. The most profound shift happens when you realize that your moral conditioning wasn't designed to make you a better person, it was designed to make you a more predictable person. The values you've internalized serve existing power structures by ensuring that you'll voluntarily limit your own potential rather than challenge those who benefit from your limitations. Your conscience has been weaponized against your own interests. This doesn't mean abandoning all ethical principles or becoming a monster. It means recognizing that effectiveness and morality operate in different domains, and that you can maintain your integrity while still optimizing for results. The ruthless person has learned to separate their strategic thinking from their moral identity. They can act decisively in competitive situations while still maintaining genuine care for the people in their inner circle. The ultimate liberation comes from understanding that most of what you've called virtue was actually psychological programming that served other people's interests more than your own. Humility often functioned as a way to prevent you from advocating for yourself. Patience frequently meant accepting less than you deserved while others took what should have been yours. Kindness became a mechanism through which your energy and resources were harvested by those who felt no reciprocal obligation. You discover that the ruthless person isn't lacking in emotional intelligence. They've simply directed their emotional intelligence towards strategic objectives rather than social harmony. They read people just as accurately as you do, but they use that information to position themselves advantageously rather than to accommodate others' needs. They understand human psychology deeply, which is precisely why they don't allow human psychology to manipulate them. The transformation isn't about becoming someone you're not. It's about becoming who you actually are underneath layers of conditioning that taught you to suppress your natural instincts for self-advancement. Your ambition, your competitive drive, your desire for control over your circumstances. These aren't character flaws to be managed. They're sources of power to be channeled strategically. You begin to see that every situation in your life has been a negotiation, whether you recognized it or not. Every relationship contains power dynamics, whether you chose to engage with them consciously or not. Every interaction includes elements of strategic positioning, whether you optimized for advantage or allowed others to optimize at your expense. The ruthless person has been playing this game consciously while you've been pretending the game doesn't exist. The final realization is that your effectiveness as a human being, your ability to protect the people you care about, to pursue the goals that matter to you, to create the life you want to live, depends entirely on your willingness to engage with reality as it exists rather than as you wish it existed. Power respects power. Strength attracts opportunity. Strategic thinking creates options. Clear boundaries generate respect. Your journey towards strategic ruthlessness becomes a journey towards psychological freedom. Freedom from the exhausting work of managing other people's emotions. Freedom from the chronic stress of trying to be all things to all people. Freedom from the disappointment that comes from expecting fairness in systems designed to reward effectiveness. Freedom from the guilt that accompanies every act of legitimate self-interest. The most beautiful aspect of this transformation is discovering that you can be both strategically ruthless and genuinely caring, but only for the people and causes you consciously choose to prioritize. The ruthless person has learned to allocate their compassion strategically rather than broadcasting it indiscriminately. They pour their full emotional investment into their chosen relationships and objectives while maintaining professional effectiveness in all other interactions. Their confidence isn't arrogance. It's the emotional resilience that comes from knowing exactly where they stand and what they're willing to defend. You realize that the world has been waiting for you to step into your power all along. Every situation where you held back, every opportunity you didn't pursue, every negotiation where you accepted less than you could have received, these weren't examples of virtue. They were missed opportunities to create the life you actually wanted. The ultimate truth is that strategic ruthlessness isn't about becoming someone different. It's about finally becoming yourself without apology. It's about aligning your actions with your actual interests rather than with social expectations that were never designed to serve you. It's about recognizing that your effectiveness in achieving your goals is a moral imperative, not a moral compromise. You are not responsible for maintaining systems that limit your potential. You are not obligated to sacrifice your interests for people who wouldn't reciprocate. You are not required to play by rules that were designed to keep you playing small. The ruthless person understood this from the beginning and built their entire approach to life around this recognition. Your power was always there, waiting beneath layers of conditioning that taught you to fear it. The moment you decide to reclaim it is the moment your real life begins. A life where your effectiveness serves your values rather than undermining them, where your strategic thinking amplifies your ability to care for what matters most, and where your success becomes the foundation for everything you want to create in this world. The choice has always been yours. The ruthless person simply chose consciously what you've been avoiding unconsciously. The decision to prioritize effectiveness over approval, results over comfort, and strategic thinking over social conditioning. The world is waiting to see what you'll do with this knowledge. Now you know. The question is, what will you choose to do with what you know?